Motion number 9 on terms and conditions of employment. Minister to move. Minister Justin Madders.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the National Minimum Wage Amendment Regulations 2025 be considered by the House. The purpose of these regulations is to increase the national living wage rate and the national minimum wage rates on the 1st of April 2025. These regulations were laid in draft before Parliament on the 4th of February and approved by the other place on the 17th of March. This government is committed to making work pay. The plan to make work pay will tackle the low pay, poor working conditions and poor job security that have been holding our economy back for far too long. Earlier this month, this House approved passage of the landmark Employment Rights Bill, which will benefit more than 10 million workers in every corner of the country and deliver the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. Some aspects of the bill and accompanying legislation and guidance will not come into effect for some time, as the government continues to engage with stakeholders, businesses and trade unions on its implementation. But when we took office last year, we committed to taking immediate action where we could, and on the minimum wage, we have done so. One of the proudest achievements of the last Labour government was the creation of the national minimum wage, which eliminated the extreme low pay that was blighting our country. We are proud to say that one of the first actions taken by this Labour government within a month of last year's general election was to overhaul the remit to the Low Pay Commission. So, for the first time, this remit now explicitly includes the cost of living as one of the key factors to be considered when making national living wage recommendations. We have begun the journey towards creating a genuine living wage, as well as extending this to all workers aged over 18 by moving towards a single adult rate. Before turning to the precise details of the regulations, I would like to extend my thanks to the Low Pay Commission. The Commissioners and their officials have worked diligently and efficiently, particularly after the updates to the remit were made, and we were pleased to accept all of their recommendations. This is testament to their social partnership model and expert analysis and engagement, which ensures the government can deliver on its ambitious agenda, but without adversely impacting on businesses, the labour market or the wider economy. So now, Madam Deputy Speaker, turning to the detail of the regulations themselves, which after parliamentary approval will take effect on the 1st of April. The national living wage rate, which currently applies to workers aged 21 and over, will increase from £11.44 to £12.21. This represents a rise of 77 pence or 6.7%, well above all measures and projections of inflation, and therefore delivers direct real terms pay increases to an estimated 3 million workers. We will also be delivering large increases to the other national minimum wage rates. The 18 to 20-year-old rate will increase by £1.40 from £8.60 an hour to £10 an hour. That is a record 16.3% increase for that age group. So this means a full-time worker on the 18 to 20 minimum wage rate will see their gross annual earnings increase by around £2,500 a year, a well-earned pay rise and a significant step towards parity with the headline rate. The national minimum wage rate for 18 to 20-year-olds will be equal to 82% of the national living wage in 2025, compared to 75% in 2024. The minimum wage rate for workers above school leaving age but under 18 years old will increase from £6.40 to £7.55 an hour, a large rise of £1.15 or 18%. The same rise will apply to the apprenticeship minimum wage rate, which applies to apprentices aged under 19 or in the first year of their apprenticeship. And finally, the accommodation offset rate, which is the maximum daily amount that an employer can charge a worker for accommodation without it affecting their pay for minimum wage purposes, will increase by 6.7% or 67 pence to £10.66. I'll draw members' attention to the comprehensive impact assessment which the Department published alongside this legislation, and as they may have noted, the impact assessment, which includes inequalities assessment, has received a green fit-for-purpose rating from the Independent Regulatory Policy Committee. And as I have touched on, we estimate that the increases to the minimum wage rates will deliver a direct pay increase for over 3 million workers, while an additional 4 million could benefit from the positive spillover effects. The minimum wage has greatly reduced pay equality in the UK, with the share of low-paid jobs in hourly terms estimated at 3.4% in 2024. That's a record low and down from 21.9% in 1999. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the work does not stop there as we continue to build towards a genuine living wage and the extension of eligibility to work as aged between 18 and 20 by ending the discriminatory age bands. And to that end, we will publish in due course a fresh remit to the Low Pay Commission, asking them to recommend minimum wage rates to apply from next April. As part of this, the Low Pay Commission will be consulting about the appropriate trajectory towards the single adult rate as we ensure that this is delivered without adverse impacts on youth employment, as well as participation in training and education. And like the previous Labour government, with the creation of the minimum wage over a quarter of a century ago, this Labour government will be proud to leave a profound legacy for workers' rights, because we are making work pay, and we are proud to make more progress on this by supporting this instrument today. So I commend these regulations to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper, I call Shadow Minister Dame Harriett Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I rise to say that we will not be opposing the increases to the national minimum wage or the national living wage. The national living wage being something that my party introduced to make work pay, and we celebrate the fact that the progress was made in ending low pay and that the Minister cited that from the dispatch box this evening. But as His Majesty's official opposition, it's also our duty to scrutinise the government on all matters. So I will have several questions for the Minister this evening. And in particular, I want to highlight that the work that the Low Pay Commission has done, for which I also thank them, was done before the Halloween budget of broken promises last October. After that budget, the increase to the national living and minimum wages, but also, of course, the measures such as the increase to national insurance, the Unison Assistant General Secretary John Richards welcomed the increase to the pay measures, but said, as it stands, the new legal minimum is more than the current lowest hourly rates in the NHS, in our universities and some other public services. This will give employers multiple headaches. So my first question is, what will the government do to address the pay implications of this rise on those working in the public sector in such important roles? The second question is the increase in the national minimum wage for workers above school leaving age, but not yet 18, is going up by nearly 18%. And on the 1st of April this year, the national insurance threshold for employers drops to £5,000 per year. And this means that an employer will have to start paying national insurance on any young person if they work for more than 13 or more hours a week. And because of this, businesses have warned that they're cutting back on hiring younger workers or indeed reducing the hours that they give to them. This risk is not faced by solely those who are in work, but also, of course, those who are seeking to get into work. So what assessments since the Halloween budget has the Minister made of the impact of the increase on young people's ability to access jobs? And what will the government do to make sure that young people or those looking for a job will not be penalised by this increase? This increase will significantly affect small and medium-sized enterprises. As usual, it looks to us that they will bear the brunt of the increased labour costs. It doesn't look that way just to us. According to the government's own impact assessment, small and medium-sized businesses will face 56% of the cost of the increase, despite representing only 37% of the share of employment. So this is another cost increase on smaller businesses that are already having to pay this government's national insurance jobs tax, the hike in business rates, and the impact of the measures from the Employment Rights Bill. In particular, businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, which are the businesses most likely to be paying the minimum wage. The government's impact assessment of the Employment Rights Bill, just to remind the House, states that they expect the policies covered within the bill to impose a direct cost on businesses of up to £5 billion a year. It also notes that on average these costs will be greater for those smaller and micro businesses. So can the Minister provide the House with a figure for the total cost increase of employing someone full-time on the previous national living wage because of these other changes that have been introduced by his government. This government has created a challenging business environment, Madam Deputy Speaker. It recognises this themselves when, in their own impact assessment, they state that there's some evidence of challenging business conditions for small and medium-sized businesses. Around 42.7% and 36.8% of micro and small businesses, respectively, reported having less than 3 months of cash reserves in September 2024. So we support the principle of fair pay for workers and for making work pay. However, after listening to businesses, we're concerned that the rises could impact workers and businesses in industries that are already facing financial challenges through a range of unintended consequences. It's easy for those on Whitehall to squiggle their pen, but combinations of all of these measures have real-life consequences for businesses across the country. The National Insurance Jobs Tax and Employment Rights Bill are piling on additional costs onto businesses and hammering the private sector, which we rely on to grow the economy. In summary, has the government considered the full impact of all these increases on businesses happening all at the same time? I fear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that tomorrow's emergency budget will be another wake-up call.
I call Yuan Yang.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard today how the rise in the national minimum wage will deliver a direct pay increase for over 3 million workers, and for the first time in history, the minimum wage in this country is being linked to the true cost of living, beginning the journey to make it a genuine living wage. And we can also take from history a wealth of economic evidence on the positive impacts of minimum wages that show that they lead to overall rises in pay, with no significant impact on employment. And while I take the Honourable Member for West Worcestershire's questions and appreciate her contributions, of course, as a fellow Treasury Committee member, time and time again, these studies have shown that while similar concerns have been echoed throughout the 80s and 90s, that the overall outcome of increase in the minimum wage is simply that, an increase in pay with no significant impact on employment.
Would she give way?
Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Would she agree with me that many of the concerns being shared by the party opposite are also the same concerns that were raised at the introduction of the minimum wage?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and yes, that is the case. I think we have heard throughout history these concerns being raised, and yet when we look at econometric evidence, looking in hindsight at the actual impacts on the economy, no discernible impact. And I'll whiz through a few different studies. In the US, David Card and Alan Kruger studies on the 1992 increase in the minimum wage in New Jersey, 1988 rise in California's minimum wage, and the federal minimum wage increase the following year. In the EU, Thomas Kuchera's 2017 study from 18 different countries. In the UK, Christian Van Stolk's 2017 study. We can go on and on about the evidence, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I think what we can see from the trends is that while these concerns have been raised over time, the actual outcome is increases in wage, and that is what we're seeking to ensure. I'll take that intervention. Goodbye.
Would the Honourable Member agree that these uplifts also benefit women, younger and older workers, workers with disability and minority ethnic backgrounds more than others, so make a huge boost for equality as well?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with the my honourable friend's point. And as the Women's Budget Group does show, the Employment Rights Bill, legislation for the minimum wage, benefits female workers disproportionately because female workers are disproportionately likely to be paid less than men. I've made reference to econometric studies, but they use econometric methods to confirm what many of us can see in our communities firsthand. Too many people have too long been due a pay rise, and that we can make the lowest paid better off. When we do so, that spending goes back into our high streets and into our local economies. Yep. I'd of course like to see even more studies done, and with better data, starting off with improvements to the labour force survey, an issue that I know that the Honourable Member for West Worcestershire and I have discussed on the Treasury Select Committee, as so many organisations have flagged this data as an area of concern. But today I want to focus on one particular group of low-paid workers who are very significant for me and my constituency of Earley and Woodley, young people. There are around 13,000 undergraduates at the University of Reading, which sits in my constituency, who will be better off because of these new laws that raise the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds to £10 an hour. It means a record wage boost for this age group, you can see that gross annual earnings rise by £2,500, and as well for apprentices who are the skilled workers of tomorrow. Now, I support the government's youth guarantee to ensure all young people are in education, employment or training. The King's Trust, however, has found that 1 in 10 young people outside of education, employment or training turned down a job because they couldn't afford the costs associated with that job. For example, travel, clothing or childcare. And that means that for many young people, a barrier to employment is that employment does not pay well enough for young people.
On that point, was she allowed?
Yes.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. She's making an excellent speech, but I wonder whether she shares my concern that I think I heard made by the Honourable Lady, the member for West Worcestershire, about the rate at which the living wage is paid to young people, almost advocating for a reduction in that current rate because of the impact it would have on business, and whether she would agree with me that is a rather aggressive view to have, when actually what young people need is the ability to pay their bills, live a life that they enjoy, and future build a home for themselves.
Yeah. Very much agree with the sentiment of my honourable friend that young people are the future, and to ensure that they get off to the best start in life possible, they need work that pays. That means that they're living in stability and not concerned about paying the bills from day to day or month to month. Most young people nowadays have to do a mixture of work and educational training in order to make ends meet, and more than half of full-time students are now working long hours and paid jobs as of 2024. And that's a significant rise from even 3 years prior during the pandemic, when around over 2/3 had no term-time employment. This is, of course, driven by the escalating cost of living for young people, particularly rises in rent. And I want here to quote a constituent of mine called Poppy, who's 20 years old and studies at the University of Reading, who says that working part-time was never optional, but rather a necessity. With my wages being so low, I find myself working 20 to 25 hours a week, leading me to miss lectures and seminars throughout the month. And I want to make sure that young people like Poppy in my constituency are able to study without worrying about whether they're going to pay for their bills. We also know that young people are less unionised. That means they have less bargaining power and less ability to fight against unfair work terms or ask for pay rises, and therefore it's even more important that we support them in raising the minimum wage. So in conclusion, it's essential that we make work pay for the sake of our high streets, the sake of our living standards, and the sake of our future, our young people. Poppy said, I personally can't wait for the new minimum wage increase in April, as it means I should be able to reduce my hours at work, giving me more time to focus on my studies. And for people like Poppy, in my constituency and around the UK, the New Deal for working people is transformational, and I'm very glad to support today's motion.
I call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me begin by thanking the Government for laying out this important statutory instrument. The Liberal Democrats welcome this uplift in the minimum wage. We all have constituents that we know are struggling to make ends meet, and nobody should be in a position where they cannot pay their bills despite being in employment. And I'm particularly pleased that apprentices and those under 18 will benefit from increased pay under this instrument. In a few weeks, I will join Wiltshire College students and businesses across my constituency at a careers fair, and I think this will be an important piece of legislation to share with them. My constituency is a rural one, and many of the people that I represent are elderly and depend on the social care system to stay independent. Unfortunately, they are struggling to get the care they need and deserve, in part because the care workers are not being paid properly. If we paid care staff more, we might encourage more people into this hugely understaffed sector. In the southwest of England alone, there are 13,000 vacant jobs in this area. And I can tell you that in a rural constituency like mine, where public transport is expensive and unreliable, care staff are not compensated for the travel time, often end up bringing home less than the minimum wage. And whilst I share the official opposition's concern for small businesses, which my constituency has a huge number, it is important that low-paid workers earn enough to live, especially our young people and women. If the government were to adopt the Liberal Democrat proposal for a carer's minimum wage, which would see carers receive £2 more per hour than their current minimum wage, then a staggering 850,000 care workers across the UK would benefit from this increase in pay. Over 80% of them would be women. Madam Deputy Speaker, we understand that the carer's minimum wage is not a silver bullet, but it is a serious proposal that could make a big difference to patients and families across the country. And whilst the Liberal Democrats support increasing the minimum wage, I think it's a shame that this statutory instrument does not go further and give weight to this proposal. Thank you.
I call Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And first of all, may I draw attention to my register of interests as a member of the trade union Unison. Now, at the time that the national minimum wage came into force, on the 1st of April 1999, I was working as a trade union official in Unison's northern region, representing many low-paid members of staff working in social care and other areas in the northeast, and working with colleagues in the TUC who are on even lower wages in many cases. It was a fantastic achievement that came after 30 years of fighting in the face of huge opposition at that time from the Conservative Party. But I think that we can say, after 26 years of the national minimum wage, that the argument has been definitively won. So much so that there are members of this House who have never known a time without a statutory minimum wage. And so, on the 10th of April 1999, I was proud to don a high-vis vest and join my trade union colleagues and members on a march across the Tyne Bridge from Gateshead to Newcastle. That was part of the campaign for a living wage to celebrate the introduction of the national minimum wage and to argue for it to be improved. We were led by the then General Secretary of Unison, Rodney Bickerstaff, and I well remember a photograph in our local newspapers as we prepared for the march with an AA sign directing traffic saying, National Campaign for a Living Wage, long delays expected. Well, we've continued to campaign for a living wage from that time. I'm so glad to speak here today, again with a Labour government in power, making real progress towards that living wage. The changes we're making with this legislation, Madam Deputy Speaker, will mean a direct, real terms in pay increase for over 3 million workers. That includes, as we've heard, steps towards a single adult rate, with a record increase in minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds, amounting to £2,500 per year, and directions to the Low Pay Commission to look at the cost of living in their decisions in the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, back in 1999, when the national minimum wage was first introduced, it made such a difference to so many people in the North East. And similarly, I know that the legislation that we're passing today will make a huge difference to my constituents. Now, let me be clear, my ambition is for good jobs, well-paid jobs for people in the North East. My constituents and people in our region deserve decent pay and secure work, and I'll continue to work towards that. And meanwhile, those who are on minimum wage, for them, this legislation will mean more money in their pay packets, a real Labour achievement. And taken with our Employment Rights Bill, makes a real shift for working people across the country in this region. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I call Chris Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Increases to the national living wage and national minimum wage will always be supported by those in SNP benches. Indeed, we've been pushing the UK Government to adopt a real living wage, irrespective of age, since 2011. Unfortunately, we have to continue to do so, as disappointingly the Labour Party have failed to take the opportunity now that they're in government. Now, while we support these changes being introduced today, the SNP's position is clear. We want a real living wage for all workers, not just a politically convenient definition of the living wage that falls short of meeting the actual cost of living, and not just for those who are 21 and over. The Resolution Foundation currently has the real living wage set at £12.60, whereas this regulation increases the rate of the national living wage for workers who are aged 21 and over from £11.44 to £12.21 per hour. It's evidently still short of where it needs to be. Furthermore, for those aged between 18 and 21, This is 18% lower at £10 per hour. So I do wonder, given the Minister said today that through consultation and looking at cost of living, can the Minister tell me if rent is 18% lower for those under 21? Do 18-year-olds get a special rate on electricity bills or petrol for their cars? Do supermarkets give them an 18% discount for the shopping? No, I'd like to pursue this point very clearly because I think it's important. And I was going to suggest I'm going to welcome the Minister's comments about how it may be looked at next year, bringing it up to everybody's at parity. So the answer is obviously no, that we're not there yet. But I would like to see the government go farther on this, and I look forward to hear more how they'll consult on that next year. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's worth noting that in Scotland, the SNP Scottish Government have taken proactive steps to ensure the real living wage is implemented wherever we have control, particularly within our public sector. The Scottish Government has paid all staff within their pay scheme, including NHS staff, the real living wage since 2011. That's 14 years. Scotland has the highest proportion of employees paid the living wage of any nation in the UK, with 25% of the accredited real living wage employers in the UK based there. The Scottish Government is also providing funding to enable adult social care workers to be paid the living wage, benefiting up to 40,000 care workers, and are working to ensure that all staff working in private nurseries delivering their childcare pledge are paid the real living wage too. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Labour Party should demonstrate similar willingness to tackle the scourge of low pay. They pledged to make changes in line with the real living wage and to take into account the cost of living in their manifesto, and have failed at least today to do so. They have voted in on a mantra of change and have it within their power to legislate for the introduction of real living wage for all, but so far have chosen not to. They must go further and adopt a real living wage, irrespective of age, as the SNP have been calling on successive governments for the past 14 years. Thank you.
I call Sally Jameson.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I also draw members to look at my register of interests and trade union membership on there? I welcome today's move from the Government to bring a record pay boost to over 3 million workers of around £1,400, and it will also mean a record wage boost for 18 to 20-year-olds who will see their gross annual full-time earnings rise by £2,500. And for apprentices who are the skilled workers of tomorrow, a boost of 18% as they learn their trade with better financial security. And why is all of this important, Madam Deputy Speaker? Because when I visited food banks in my constituency in Doncaster, I have been saddened to learn that some of the people accessing those services are in work. They are employed and yet still cannot make ends meet. For too long in this country, work has not paid, and with this legislation today, that will change. We hear a lot about the tough choices this government has had to make after the 14 years of the party opposite, whether that's because of their disastrous mini-budget that left the mortgages soaring, or because of the neglect of our prisons, allowing them to fill up to the point of collapse, or because of the lack of investment in our NHS. This Labour government has taken a number of very difficult decisions to get our country back on track. But I can tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this has not been a tough choice to give millions of workers a pay rise. It has not been a tough choice to ensure that our apprentices have better financial security, and in fact it has been a choice that I have been proud to make. It shows that this government values workers across the country. It values the working contribution of young adults from the age of 18, and that along with our landmark Employment Rights Bill, once again in this country, it will pay to work, and secure employment will be the foundation of the British economy, which will be strong going forward.
I call Richard Foord.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The increase in the national minimum wage in the next fortnight is very welcome, and nobody in work in this wealthy country of ours should be struggling to make ends meet if they are in work. But while this uplift is a step in the right direction, it does not specifically address the challenges that we face in social care, both nationally and the area I know best in Devon. Devon currently has 28,000 filled social care positions, but 2,000 that remain unfilled, and I'm very concerned about this shortage in the workforce. It partly explains why people are going without care and why our hospitals are struggling to discharge patients.
Will you remember his way?
Yes, I will.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and I take his point about the social care sector. Does he therefore welcome Labour's Employment Rights Bill, which includes a negotiating framework for our social care staff to ensure that they are properly paid and can progress in their jobs?
I'm grateful to her for the intervention. I think a negotiating framework might be helpful, but a lot will depend on those negotiations. I think it would be far better if the government was to look sector by sector at the minimum wage and specifically identify that social care is a special case. The turnover rate for social care staff in Devon is 27%. Not only is that higher than the national average, it's roughly double that of other sectors, and explains why I'd like to see a separate higher minimum wage for social care. A striking 16% of social care workers cited low pay as the primary reason why they left the job. Many of them are simply not paid enough for the skilled, difficult, vital work that they do, and many are earning less, moving to jobs such as stacking supermarket shelves, important though that is, than they are doing the vital work of social care. In a rural county like Devon, people are having to travel long distances between the people for whom they care, and this sometimes means that their real income is less than the national minimum wage. We are looking in Devon at a shortage of social care beds. Devon County Council projects that by 2027, Devon will face a shortfall of 270 care home beds for older people with complex needs. Looking further ahead, the situation gets worse. In Honiton, the unmet need will be 72 care beds by 2033. In Columpton, 79 beds by 2033. In Seaton and Ottery St Mary, an additional 40 care beds will be required by 2033. So the current shortage of facilities in Mid and East Devon makes it plain that even more care workers will be required to meet this growing demand that we see for social care. That's why the Liberal Democrats are calling for the introduction of a carer's minimum wage, paying £2 per hour additional to the minimum wage. And of course, this funding cannot come from thin air. According to Skills for Care, increasing the pay by between £1 to £2 per hour above the national minimum wage for care workers could save up to £947 million in terms of reduced hospital admissions. But of course, there would need to be some funding up front to make this happen. The remaining funding, I suggest, should come from levying an additional tax on the gambling industry, which, according to Public Health England, costs the UK economy about £1.4 billion annually, due to the financial, physical and mental impacts of gambling, of problem gambling, and the resulting crime and loss of productivity. According to the Gambling Commission, 300,000 adults and 40,000 children in the UK are suffering from problem gambling, and it is not an industry that we should be incentivising with low taxation. Doubling the remote gaming duty is recommended by the Social Market Foundation. It would not only address the harms of problem gambling, but it would also provide a fairer way to fund this £2 per hour increase above the national minimum wage for social care workers. It's time the government acted to ensure that those who profit from gambling are contributing more to the public good. Increasing pay for the lowest paid social care workers is a simple, effective step to attract and retain staff, ensuring people in our communities receive the care they require. I support the national minimum wage increases, but we must go further and pay our social care staff more, recognising their vital role in looking after the elderly and the vulnerable. Thank you.
I call Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome the proposed increases to minimum wage rates, which will help people of all ages across all communities in our country, including a particularly welcome boost for apprentices, who are the future of our economy. And this will make a real difference, not just to people in my constituency, but across our great nation, I think for three reasons. Firstly, as other colleagues have said, we must make work pay. In fact, it's vital for the health of our economy that we do so, that contributing to our economic growth, delivering services in our communities and manufacturing the goods we need is fairly rewarded is crucial. But we know that for too long, this hasn't been the case in my constituency and in other areas. Between 2014 and 2022, salary growth in County Durham was among the lowest in the United Kingdom, increasing at less than half the rate of those regions like London. So to tackle these issues, we need to drive economic growth in regions like mine, but we also need to take clear action to ensure that those on the lowest wages see the growth in their pay they deserve. The second reason is it's crucial we tackle the cost of living crisis. In the 2.5 years I spent campaigning as a Labour candidate before being elected to this House, the cost of living crisis is one of the issues raised with me time and time again. Family after family hit by rising bills but flatlining pay. This is an issue that hit my residents particularly acutely because median weekly pay for those in full-time work in my constituency is £150 less each week than the UK average. That's £600 a month less to pay the bills and make ends meet. That's why it's been so vital that this government has taken cost of living into account when setting minimum wage levels this time. Thirdly, we must support growth. To grow our economy, routes into work, apprenticeships, entry-level jobs and other routes into starting your career must be attractive. And of course, a key part of that is having pay levels that reward those going into work and incentivise participation in the labour market. And of course, for young people in my constituency, getting a job with decent pay has too often meant moving away from the town they grew up in. That's another reason why this direct action to tackle low pay is so important. And in a constituency with a significant history of manufacturing and modern manufacturing, now, Madam Deputy Speaker, like the fantastic Hitachi Trains factory, I particularly welcome the wage increase for 18 to 20-year-olds and for those in apprenticeships. This ensures that young people going into work in the future of our country's manufacturing sector are paid properly and a secure future looks possible locally. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I came into politics to make a genuine difference for the people of my hometown in Newton Aycliffe, the wider constituency and our country. Increasing the minimum wage is one way to do that, putting more money in the pockets of 3 million of our citizens. That is the difference a Labour government makes.
Hear. I call Rosie Wrighting.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government has made a solid commitment to make work pay and put more money in working people's pockets. In my constituency of Kettering, we have a large amount of distribution jobs, and as a result of the action of this government, people in Kettering on minimum wage will have more money in their pockets to last them through the end of the month. As someone who spent my career in business, I know how important it is for businesses to see a productive, motivated workforce and minimal turnover. It benefits not only businesses, but also workers as well. In Kettering, it means people earning a decent wage will then spend their money supporting our local economy. It's shameful that the party opposite let this country get to a place where people who work full-time are still queuing at food banks to feed their families. The uplift in national minimum wage is a huge part of the national renewal Labour has promised this country and will be a pay increase for 3 million people in Kettering and across the UK. Young people in my constituency deserve a minimum wage that reflects the work they do. I speak to many 18 to 20-year-olds in Kettering who face the same financial pressures as adults older than them. One of the best things about my job, Madam Deputy Speaker, is visiting many schools and colleges across my constituency, where young people talk to me about their plans for their future. This uplift will mean a wage boost of 18% for apprenticeships in Kettering, so we can incentivise young people to see apprenticeships as a financially viable option and to start to fill the skills gap businesses across the UK face after 14 difficult years under the Conservatives. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last Labour government brought in the national minimum wage, and it is this Labour government that will be securing Britain's future and making work pay. Thank you.
I call David Pinto-Duschinsky.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to start by declaring an interest as a proud member of the GMB and Unison unions. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a debate about four numbers: 3 million, 1,400, 2,500 and 10 million. 3 million is the number of people who will benefit from the fantastic measures being announced today. £1,400 is how much they will benefit, a real life-changing amount. £2,500 is how much someone 18 to 20 years old will benefit from these changes. And 10 million is the transformative impact that our Employment Rights Bill will have on so many lives. All of this achieved by a Labour government with our plan for change delivering security for working people, and so much of it opposed by the party opposite. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's really striking that on a day where we are debating giving a pay rise to 3 million people, it speaks volumes that the opposition benches are completely empty. That is the difference between the government and the party opposite, and that is the difference that a Labour government makes. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the spokesperson of the party opposite is just tried slightly to rewrite history. But I'm old enough to remember the pre-minimum wage era, and I'm old enough to remember who brought it to an end. It was a Labour government. The introduction of the national minimum wage was a radical and transformative step, and it was opposed every step of the way by the party opposite. When Labour included a policy for a minimum wage in our 1992 manifesto, Michael Howard claimed that it would destroy up to 2 million jobs. And when we brought it to this place for legislation in 1998, the party opposite fought it tooth and nail every single step of the way. Now, their concerns turned out to be totally unfounded. A pointless opposition to measures which increase the wages of over 1 million workers immediately in the UK, as the evidence from my honourable friend for Earley and Woodley pointed out. And indeed, the Shadow Chancellor at the time, now better known for his railway journeys, eventually ended Tory opposition to the minimum wage, saying, and I quote, "The minimum wage has caused far less damage to employment than we feared." Well, how different the picture looks today. We have a leader of the opposition who recently said that the minimum wage was overburdening business and that maternity pay was excessive. In an article for Conservative Home, the Shadow Chancellor said that our measures to boost employment rights and make work pay would have a negative effect on business, and I quote, especially for lower wage sectors like hospitality and retail. Perhaps the Shadow Chancellor does not realise that the entire point of these measures is to bring these workers, particularly young workers, out of low pay, improve retention, keep people in work and boost our economy. The low-wage, low-growth economy that his party and the party opposite presided over for 14 years brought with it stagnation and a growing number of people who either left employment or never entered it in the first place. So given that, I think we all know where we stand. I shall wrap up by saying this represents a choice today. Our choice is to increase the minimum wage, a choice to put back money in the pockets of working people, a choice to put people first. It's a choice that will help thousands of people in Hendon and millions of people across this country, and it's a choice I'm proud to support.
I call Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I declare an interest as a member and former employee of Unison? And I know that Unison's young members will welcome the unprecedented rise in the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds. As we've heard already, this will mean £2,500 extra a year for those on the national minimum wage in their gross salary.
Brilliant.
And this is a record change, and it will make a huge difference for young constituents of mine in Ealing, Southall. And the Labour government has made clear that this is only the start. Absolutely. This is the beginning of a journey. We are working towards bringing the youth rate up so that we eventually come to a single adult rate. And equal pay for equal work has long been a belief of the Labour Party. So it's right that this also extends to younger people. And I'm delighted that it is not only with younger people, but also in terms of disabled workers and black, Asian and minority ethnic workers that this Labour government is going to deliver for. And we have started the consultation on bringing in mandatory pay gap reporting for disabled and for black, Asian and minority ethnic workers. Madam Deputy Speaker, this change today in the youth rate in particular goes hand in hand with our youth guarantee and our plan to create pathways to good quality employment for under 22-year-olds with health conditions who the previous government left on the scrap heap with no help at all. Labour will not only ensure these young people get help to find a job, we'll also ensure that that job is decently paid. We will make work a better choice than benefits for young people. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I say, this is the beginning of a journey, this decision that we are making today. But I have heard from the member opposite, the Shadow Minister, the member for West Worcestershire, who has said that the Conservative Party won't be voting against this motion tonight. Although I must say her speech gave a very good impression of someone who was against this. And I think if the Conservatives do not agree with this, they should actually vote against it. And they should tell us how much they think young people are worth. They should tell us if we should pay them £10 an hour. They should tell us if £12.21 is what they would pay the minimum wage. They should let us know how much they would cut people's wages by. In contrast, the Labour government are proud to be putting money back in 3 million working people's pockets. That is money that they will spend on local businesses and on local high streets. In contrast to 14 years of failure from the Conservatives, Labour is making work pay. Thank you.
Minimum wage of those 14 years.
With Leave of the House, Minister Justin Madders.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With Leave of the House, I would like to address the many contributions we've had in debate. I think we've had a very positive debate overall. First of all, can I welcome support from the Liberal Democrats and actually welcome the Honourable Member back. I know she's been away for a little while, but thank her, and it's good to see her back in her place. She made some very important points about the social care sector. In particular, we know that travel time is a huge issue and the abuse of that, and that's something the Low Pay Commission are very keen to look at as well. And of course, when we get the Fair Work Agency up and running, I am sure that they will be focusing on that as well. And her Liberal Democrat colleague for Honiton and Surbiton also talked about the importance of the social care sector, and our impact assessment has established that about 1 in 5 workers in social care jobs will actually get a direct pay rise from these increases today. That's 1 in 5 of the entire social care workforce. And ahead of making the recommendations, the Low Pay Commission, as one would expect, have consulted widely, including with representatives of social care workers. And we believe that actually social care workers have been undervalued in this country for far too long, which is why we are introducing the first ever fair pay agreement in the adult social care sector, so that care professionals are recognised and rewarded for the important work they do. So whilst I appreciate the honourable members' wish to have a separate rate for care workers, we think we are doing the right things to actually recognise and value social care workers. And of course, having different rates brings a whole range of other challenges in terms of enforcement and actually clarity for employers, which we think is important. There were a number of, I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, excellent speeches on these benches tonight. My friend, the member for Earley and Woodley, made the positive economic case and referred to the wealth of evidence in support of increases in the minimum wage, and that's something that we absolutely passionately believe in this side of the House, that actually increased protections at work, increased minimum wages actually is a good thing, not just for individuals, but it's also good for the wider economy. And she also mentioned the many young people in her constituency who will benefit from the moves to parity with the 18 to 20 age band with the adult rate. My friend, the member for Ealing Southall, has of course great knowledge and experience in this area, and she said this is the beginning of a journey, and that is right. We do recognise that it will take time to achieve our ambitions that we have for the Low Pay Commission for people in this country, but this is a journey that we are determined to finish. And my old friend, the member for Blaydon and Consett, took us back into the depths of history. I must declare that I'm one of those who can remember what it was like before the minimum wage, and yeah, I think when I tell my children how much I used to earn in my first jobs, they can't believe it. But it was true. That was what the world was like before the minimum wage, and of course she reminded us as well of actually the doom-laden warnings we got from the Conservative opposition at that time. I think we heard a small echo of that tonight, but I think history has proved that those warnings were wrong. My old friend for Doncaster Central spoke passionately about the issues within work poverty, and I think that is absolutely one of the key things that we've got to see change in this country. For too long, people have not had work pay for them. Earnings have not kept up with the cost of living, and that is one of the reasons why the Low Pay Commission's remit has changed. Yeah.
Very, very grateful to the Minister for giving way. The Low Pay Commission has previously said something like 300,000 people are not being paid the minimum wage despite being on it. They're being underpaid. I wonder if you might update the House on this government's progress to make sure that all people on the minimum wage are actually being paid the minimum wage.
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Member makes a very important point, Madam Deputy Speaker, that these rights are only as good as the ability of the government to enforce them, and HMRC, as we know, have a very effective system to deliver on minimum wage, and we will be shortly releasing our latest round of naming and shaming of those employees who have not done the right thing. But we hope actually the Fair Work Agency, when it is established, will be even more effective in terms of delivering fairness across the country and making sure that everyone gets the minimum wage that they deserve. We know there are particular sectors where there are acute challenges. I'll just turn to the points made by the Scottish Nationalist spokesperson about the bills and costs of an 18 to 20-year-old being the same as an adult. That's absolutely something I understand, and that is of course why we've changed the Low Pay Commission's remit to ensure that eventually we get parity with that age group for the full adult rate, and of course that's also why we've changed the remit of the Low Pay Commission to move towards a real living wage for all adults. We do understand that that is such an important thing for us to deliver on, and of course it should be mentioned, although you may feel that we're not quite there yet. We've got to ensure that we take evidence as we go along from businesses about how this impacts on particular sectors and particular parts of society. But 18 to 20-year-olds are getting a £2,500 pay rise this year as a result of these regulations. That is something I'm sure that he will welcome. My friend, the member for Newton Aycliffe and Spennymoor, raised, I think, very, very well the regional impact of the wage increase in this part of the world, and it's actually the case that these regulations will mean 140,000 workers in the North East, or 14.5% of the total workforce in that region, will benefit from that increase, and that is something we should all be absolutely delighted about. My humble friend, the member for Kettering, also raised the issue of in-work poverty, and that is of course why the remit is being changed, and we want to make sure that actually in-work poverty is consigned to the history books. My humble friend, the member for Hendon, spoke out in real stark terms the figures that are associated with these regulations. I may mention them again at some point before I finish, but that is the bold numbers that really will go directly into people's pockets, and something that we can show as tangible proof of a Labour government delivering for working people in this country. And he did raise the empty benches opposite, and I don't want to equate to that to mean that the Conservative don't support the increases today. I think the Shadow Minister said that they did, but I do put her on notice that her leader has been less than fulsome in her support for the minimum wage, so I hope that her support today has not damaged her career prospects. I mean, it may well be that there's another leader in a few months anyway, and that things are looking up. But we do hope that the Conservative Party continue to support the minimum wage as we move forward, and that they don't change tack now that they've entered opposition. But she did raise a number of important questions, which I will now try and address, Madam Deputy Speaker. She raised in terms of the impact on public sector workers, and of course pay for most frontline workers is set through pay review body processes, and they actually take account of national living wage increases as part of their processes. We don't believe there are actually many public sector workers who are going to be directly affected by this, but it is something that departments will take into account when they set their budgets. She did also ask about the cumulative impact of changes, and of course the impact assessment does show that this year's up ratings will represent a 0.14% increase in the UK-wide wage bill, which I think is incredibly good value for what we're delivering into people's pockets. Of course, the Employment Rights Bill total impact is at most 0.4% of the total wage bill. And she raised questions about burdens on SMEs. Of course, the Low Pay Commission do take into account the impact of business. It's part of their operation. They look at the competitiveness of individual businesses, the labour market and the wider economy. They draw on extensive labour market pay analysis and stakeholder evidence when recommending rates, and we would expect them to do exactly the same next year. And of course, small businesses have had support from this government. We've increased the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500, meaning that 865,000 employers will pay no national insurance contributions at all, and more than half employers will gain or see no change from this measure. We've extended business rates relief for retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. And of course, in terms of her concerns about the impact on young people, we know that the Youth Guarantee will ensure that every young person has access to educational training to help them find a job, and we're transforming the apprenticeship levy as well to ensure that young people get the opportunities that they deserve. And I just make the point that actually in terms of the concerns that she raises about the overall labour market, that the payroll employment is actually higher now than it was this time last year. And in fact, the latest labour force survey last week showed record numbers of people in work. So perhaps the negative headlines that we've been hearing are really not actually the reality of the situation. And I would like to deal with facts, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the facts are that this will put more money into the pockets of workers around the country. Around 200,000 workers in Scotland, 160,000 workers in Northern Ireland, and around 150,000 workers in Wales. This is a real difference to people. £1,400 for a full-time worker and £2,500 for someone on the 18 to 20 rate. This is truly a worthwhile exercise, and we thank the Low Pay Commission for their work. Also HMRC, who enforce on behalf of the Department, and ACAS, who offer impartial advice and expertise to ensure that workplace disputes can be resolved and workers' rights can be upheld. This is a meaningful change being delivered by this government, Madam Deputy Speaker. It delivers a powerful message. This government, and indeed this Parliament, is committed to making work pay. These real terms increases to the minimum wage will end insecurity at work, and I commend these regulations to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. I'll now give the House a few moments to settle before we move on.